Welcome to my Chanel Most Worth Coins, WC. Today videos is one you won't to miss. We're diving into the world of top 5 1-cent Canada coins, so let's get it started. The 1993 Canadian 1-cent coin, though seemingly modest in face value, represents an enduring symbol of Canada's numismatic history, heritage, and sovereignty. Struck by the Royal Canadian Mint, this coin features the familiar portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, accompanied by the Latin Elizabeth II digi Regina. This phrase, translating to Elizabeth II by the grace of God Queen, is a formal expression of the Queen's role as monarch and head of state within the Canadian constitutional monarchy. The inclusion of Latin, a long-standing tradition in coinage across the Commonwealth, reinforces the historical continuity of royal governance while asserting the coin's legitimacy as legal tender in Canada. The obverse of the coin bears the effigy of Queen Elizabeth II, designed by Dora de Pedri Hunt, a Hungarian-Canadian sculptor. Introduced in 1990, this portrayal replaced the earlier Arnold machine design that had been used since 1965. De Pedri Hunt's version depicted the Queen wearing a pearl necklace and facing right, a more mature and regal representation that mirrored her increasing age and experience. Her portrait remained on Canadian coins until 2003, when it was succeeded by the design of Susanna Blunt. The De Pedri Hunt effigy was the first ever designed by a Canadian artist to appear on Canadian coinage, marking a milestone in the nation's cultural and artistic self-expression. Turning to the reverse, the 1993 1-cent coin features the enduring image of 2 maple leaves on a single twig, a design that has been in use since 1937 and was created by G.E. Kruger Gray, a British artist. The maple leaf is an iconic Canadian emblem, symbolizing the natural beauty and unity of the nation. It had already been widely adopted as a national symbol long before it was enshrined on the national flag in 1965. The maple leaves are rendered in fine detail, and their representation on the coin serves both as a celebration of Canada's vast forests and its national identity. The word Canada appears at the top, while the coin's date, 1993, and the denomination, 1 cent, are positioned prominently on the reverse, with the initials KG, signifying the designer Kruger Gray, tucked subtly into the base of the design. In terms of composition, the 1993 Canadian 1-cent coin continued the transitionary material usage of the late 20th century. It was struck in 2 possible metal compositions. The first was 98% copper, 0.5% tin, and 1.5% zinc, which had been used consistently through most of the coin's history. The second, introduced more widely in the early 1990s due to rising copper prices, was a copper-plated zinc version. The traditional bronze alloy coin typically weighed 2.5 grams and had a diameter of 19.05 mm with a plain, smooth edge. The introduction of copper-plated zinc coins was a cost-saving measure by the Royal Canadian Mint, though in circulation, these coins appeared virtually indistinguishable from their earlier counterparts. The mintage for the 1993 1-cent coin was substantial. Over 808 million examples were produced, making it a common date in circulation and readily available to collectors. However, what makes 1993 particularly notable to numismatists is not rarity, but context. It was a period of gradual economic reform and cost-cutting in Canadian coinage, during which the Mint began to seriously reconsider the future of the 1-cent coin. As inflation eroded the coin's purchasing power, discussions were already underway about phasing out the denomination altogether. These conversations would eventually culminate in the coin's official discontinuation in 2012, though production of the cent continued until May 2012 and circulation persisted into the following years. From a collector's perspective, the EI 1993 1-cent coin is an accessible and essential part of a complete modern Canadian coin collection. While uncirculated and proof examples can still be found in mint sets, circulated specimens are extremely common. Yet, collectors often seek pieces with full red luster, for the copper versions, minimal contact marks, or die varieties. As with many coinage issues, die cracks, doubling, and other minor mint errors can attract specialist attention. In mint state condition, a 1993 Canadian cent might only command a small premium, typically under $1 unless in exceptionally pristine form, but it holds intrinsic value as part of Canada's numismatic narrative. Culturally, the 1 cent coin is deeply embedded in Canadian memory. Though often dismissed as pennies, these coins carry sentimental and historic significance. For many Canadians, the copper cent represents a piece of childhood commerce, bought candies, school collections, or piggy banks, and its disappearance marked the end of an era. The 1993 edition sits toward the final chapter of this story, produced during the twilight decades of the denomination's life. It reflects a time when Canada was modernizing its currency infrastructure, dealing with the pressures of cost efficiency, and yet still holding fast to traditional royal symbolism and national identity. In conclusion, while the 1993 Canadian 1 cent coin may not be rare or particularly valuable in the traditional numismatic sense, its significance lies in its transitional role, bridging the gap between the classic bronze issues and the copper-plated zinc versions, between the traditions of the past and the economic realities of the future. It encapsulates a moment in Canadian history when the monarchy, national symbols, and coinage design came together in a familiar, copper-colored form, quietly circulating through countless transactions, unremarked in the moment, but remembered now with nostalgia and historical appreciation. The 1997 Canadian 1 cent coin serves as both a common yet historically meaningful artifact of Canada's circulating currency. Like many of its late 20th century counterparts, this small coin carries a deceptively simple design and modest denomination, but represents a larger narrative about Canadian identity, technological transition in minting, and the waning era of the low-value cent. On the obverse, the front side, appears the effigy of Queen Elizabeth II, Canada's sovereign, facing right and wearing a pearl necklace. This image is the 1990 effigy designed by Dora de Pedery Hunt, a Hungarian-born Canadian sculptor, and it would remain on the Canadian cent until 2003. The legend surrounding her bust reads Elizabeth II Dec Regina, a Latin abbreviation that translates to Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen. This phrase is a remnant of Canada's colonial and constitutional roots, marking the Queen not only as a figurehead, but as a formal component of the country's legal and political framework. The reverse side of the coin features the iconic 2 maple leaf twig design, a symbol closely tied to Canadian identity and pride. This motif was designed by G.E. Kruger Gray in 1937 as part of a broader modernization of Canada's coinage. It has endured for decades, in part due to its strong visual connection to Canada's vast natural heritage. The maple leaf itself had already been a recognized national symbol since the 18th century, but its adoption onto coins, and later onto the Canadian flag, cemented its role in the country's cultural consciousness. On the 1997 cent, the 2 maple leaves are sharp, pointed, and symmetrical, showing a high level of detail for such a small piece of currency. The word Canada appears above the maple twig, with the date 1997 below it and the denomination 1 cent underneath. Nestled just beside the leaves are the tiny initials KG, referring to the original reverse designer. What makes the 1997 1 cent coin especially notable is its composition. This was one of the first years in which the Royal Canadian Mint fully transitioned away from the traditional bronze alloy that had characterized cents for over a century. In previous decades, the cent had been struck from 98% copper, with small percentages of tin and zinc. However, beginning in 1997, in response to the rising cost of copper and the inefficiencies of striking heavier coins, the Mint adopted a new planchet made of steel, with a thin layer of copper plating. This change significantly altered the coin's weight, dropping it to 2.25 grams compared to the older 2.5 grams, and making it magnetic for the first time. This magnetic property made the coins easier to sort in vending machines and allowed the mint to reduce costs without dramatically changing the coin's appearance to the general public. While a small number of 1997 cents were also struck on older copper-plated zinc planchets during the transition, the vast majority were copper-plated steel, an important detail for collectors and numismatists to note. The diameter of the coin remained consistent with earlier issues at 1905 millimeters, and the edge continued to be smooth. The finish of the copper plating still gave the coin the familiar reddish-brown appearance of earlier cents, helping to preserve continuity even as the material composition shifted. Despite the internal changes, to the naked eye, the average Canadian would not have noticed much difference when handling the new 1997 cent. This approach by the Royal Canadian Mint was both economical and strategic, allowing for a seamless transition that reduced costs without causing confusion in commerce or the need for widespread public education. In terms of mintage, the 1997 1-cent coin was produced in staggering numbers. Over 669 million pieces were struck for circulation, making it a very common date. As such, it is generally of low numismatic value unless found in uncirculated or proof-like condition. However, collectors often seek out proof-like sets, specimen sets, and uncirculated rolls from the mint for higher quality examples. Die varieties and minting anomalies, such as die cracks, doubling, or off-center strikes, also attract attention from error coin collectors. Because 1997 was a transition year in terms of composition, identifying and verifying the type of planchet, steel versus zinc, can be of interest to more serious numismatists, especially those examining coin weights or magnetic properties. Historically, the 1997 cent also exists within a broader context of economic and technological evolution in Canadian currency. It marked a decade of innovation by the Royal Canadian Mint, which was developing some of the most advanced coinage technologies in the world. The decision to use multi-ply plated steel, a method that would soon expand to other denominations, was part of a broader cost-saving initiative that aligned with the Mint's commitment to efficiency and environmental sustainability. These changes laid the groundwork for later modifications in coin production, including the introduction of colorized circulation coins and more complex security features in higher denominations. Culturally, the 1997 1-cent coin is part of the generation of cents that would eventually be phased out. Although it circulated widely in the years following its release, it represented a shrinking presence in the pockets of Canadians. Inflation had long eroded the buying power of the 1-cent coin, and by the 1990s its usefulness was increasingly being questioned. Still, the coin remained in daily use for another 15 years, with its production officially ending in 2012 and its withdrawal from circulation beginning in 2013. For many Canadians, especially those born in the 1980s and 1990s, the 1997 cent represents the kind of coin that jingled in piggy banks, was traded for candy at corner stores, or collected for school fundraisers, quietly witnessing the everyday transactions of Canadian life. In conclusion, the 1997 Canadian 1-cent coin stands at a crossroads between tradition and innovation. It retains the regal portrait of Queen Elizabeth II and the familiar maple leaf design, both enduring symbols of national heritage while also embracing new materials and minting technologies that pointed to the future of Canadian coinage. Though it is common and of modest face value, it holds a unique place in the numismatic timeline as the first full year of steel cents and a harbinger of the denomination's eventual demise. Today, collectors may pass over it in bulk lots or circulation jars, but to the informed eye, the 1997 cent is a subtle but meaningful relic of a transforming monetary landscape, a quiet witness to changing times. The 2001 Canadian 1-cent coin is more than just a small unit of currency. It is a product of evolving minting technologies, royal symbolism, and national identity, representing a fading chapter in Canada's numismatic heritage. On the obverse side of the coin is the familiar effigy of Queen Elizabeth II, Canada's monarch and head of state. She is shown facing right, wearing a string of pearls, with a dignified expression and styled hair. This portrait is the work of Dora de Patery Hunt, a Canadian sculptor of Hungarian origin, who in 1990 became the first Canadian artist to design a reigning monarch's effigy for national coinage. Her depiction remained on all denominations of Canadian coins from 1990 until 2003. Encircling the Queen's portrait is the Latin Elizabeth II deg Regina, which stands for Elizabeth II, Dei Gratia Regina, Elizabeth II by the grace of God, Queen. This phrase, while formal and steeped in tradition, reminds us of Canada's status as a constitutional monarchy and a member of the Commonwealth, where Queen Elizabeth served as symbolic head of state for over 70 years. On the reverse side is one of the most recognizable motifs in Canadian coinage, the two maple leaves on a single twig, designed in 1937 by George Edward Kruger Gray, a British artist and coin designer. The maple leaf had long been associated with Canada, appearing on military insignia, patriotic banners, and eventually becoming the central symbol on Canada's national flag in 1965. The image on the coin depicts two crisp, pointed leaves extending from a short stem, symbolizing the richness and unity of Canada's natural landscape. Beneath the twig are the initials KG, crediting the original artist. The word Canada is boldly printed above with 1 cent just below the leaves and the date 2001 at the very bottom. Though the design remained unchanged for decades, its familiarity brought a sense of continuity and tradition even as other aspects of Canadian life evolved. One of the most important aspects of the 2001 cent lies not in its design, but in its metal composition and physical characteristics. By this point, the Royal Canadian Mint had moved away from the traditional bronze alloy that had been used for most of the 20th century. In its place was a copper-plated steel core, introduced as a cost-effective and efficient alternative. As copper prices rose and demand for cheaper minting solutions increased, the mint began producing coins with a steel core, layered with a very thin layer of pure copper to maintain the traditional color. This change made the 2001 cent magnetic, unlike its pre-1997 counterparts, which were non-magnetic due to their higher copper content. This magnetic property allowed for easier sorting in automated systems like coin counting machines and vending devices. The weight of the coin was 2.35 grams, and it had a diameter of 19.05 millimeter with a smooth, plain edge. These specifications were virtually indistinguishable from earlier versions by casual observation, but from a metallurgical standpoint, they marked a significant shift in how Canada approached coin production in the modern era. From a production standpoint, the mintage of the 2001 1-cent coin was immense. Over 716 million examples were struck for general circulation by the Royal Canadian Mint. As a result, the 2001 cent is considered a common date, and circulated examples remain abundant even after the denomination was officially discontinued in 2012. For collectors, the standard 2001 cent holds little value in circulated condition. However, pristine mint state, MS-65 or higher examples, as well as those in proof-like or specimen sets, can hold interest, particularly for those assembling complete year sets. Additionally, error coins, such as off-center strikes, doubled, dies, or coins struck on incorrect planchets, are of particular interest to advanced numismatists and can command premiums depending on rarity and condition. The coin also carries historical and cultural resonance. The year 2001 marked the dawn of a new millennium, and although the world was facing the rapid rise of the digital economy, Physical currency like the 1-cent coin remained integral to everyday transactions in Canada. However, inflation had steadily eroded the cent's purchasing power to the point that it cost more to produce than it was worth. Despite its fading practical utility, the 1-cent coin continued to circulate widely in the early 2000s, accepted by Canadians as a familiar relic of childhood piggy banks and corner store purchases. That same year, the Royal Canadian Mint was already preparing for the eventual obsolescence of the coin, testing new plating techniques and assessing the feasibility of withdrawing the cent from circulation. From a symbolic perspective, the 2001 cent is also part of Queen Elizabeth II's numismatic legacy. Her portrait appeared on every Canadian cent since her coronation in 1952, and each new effigy marked a passage of time and subtle evolution in royal iconography. The Depatery Hunt portrait used on the 2001 cent was a departure from the youthful, idealized version seen in earlier decades. Instead, it presented a more mature, realistic representation of the Queen, echoing themes of continuity, aging, and longevity in service. It helped reinforce the notion that Canada was a modern country still deeply connected to its historical foundations, blending heritage with innovation. By the time the 2001 cent entered circulation, the Royal Canadian Mint had also become a global leader in coinage technology and innovation. The success of the copper-plated steel formula in the 1-cent coin would go on to influence other denominations, eventually leading to the multi-ply plated steel coins seen in nickels, dimes, and quarters. The 2001 cent, then, was part of a quiet revolution, a blend of tradition and transformation. It retained the look and feel of coins from previous decades while embracing a cost-effective and modern internal structure. In conclusion, the 2001 Canadian 1-cent coin is an emblematic piece of a disappearing era. It captures Canada's numismatic traditions, rooted in royal symbolism, national identity, and iconic design, while simultaneously representing economic pragmatism and technological progress. Though abundant and inexpensive, the 2001 cent is a milestone in the long arc of Canadian coinage. It stood at the crossroads of past and future, bearing the familiar maple leaf and monarch that Canadians had grown up with, yet internally built for an era where efficiency and modernization were paramount. For collectors, historians, and nostalgic Canadians alike, the 2001 1-cent coin is more than a piece of copper-plated steel. It is a small, round witness to a changing world. The 2008 Canadian 1-cent coin stands as one of the final issues in the long and storied history of Canada's iconic penny. It may appear modest in size and value, but the 2008 cent carries layers of meaning, historical, technological, and cultural, reflecting a period of accelerated change in Canadian currency and economic practices. Its obverse, or front side, continues the long-standing tradition of bearing the effigy of Queen Elizabeth II, Canada's constitutional monarch and figurehead since 1952. In this particular coin, the portrait is the 2003 design by Susanna Blunt, a Canadian artist whose rendition of the Queen was significant for its departure from earlier depictions. Unlike previous portraits where Elizabeth II wore a crown, Blunt's image shows her bareheaded with a calm and confident demeanor, emphasizing a more modern, approachable view of the monarch. Her initials, SB, are subtly placed at the neckline. Surrounding the Queen's effigy is the Latin Elizabeth II de Regina, which stands for Elizabeth II de Gratia Regina, Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, Queen. This traditional phrasing links Canadian coins to their British and Commonwealth origins, preserving the royal lineage and the formal recognition of the monarchy's constitutional role in Canada's governance. On the reverse side is a design, instantly recognizable to nearly every Canadian: the two maple leaves on a single twig, created by G.E. Kruger Gray in 1937. This design had adorned the cent coin for over 70 years by 2008, making it one of the longest-standing motifs in Canadian. Coinage history. The maple leaf, long a symbol of Canadian pride, natural abundance, and independence, serves as a unifying image that transcends linguistic and regional divisions. The leaves are sharp, veined, and elegant, positioned to suggest symmetry and vitality. Above the leaves, the word Canada identifies the nation of origin, while beneath the image appears the denomination 1 cent and the mint year 2008. Just beside the stem of the leaves are the initials KG in tribute to the original designer. Though unchanged in design, the reverse reflects decades of subtle adjustments in minting standards, surface finishing, and die sharpening, which contribute to the coin's sharp modern appearance. The physical specifications of the 2008 cent are particularly notable, especially in terms of composition. By this point, the Royal Canadian Mint had firmly committed to a multi-ply plated steel plancher, which had become the standard for cents starting in 2000. The coin consists of a steel core, coated first in layers of nickel and then in copper, giving it the traditional reddish-orange color associated with pennies. This high-tech plating method, developed in Canada, provided a lightweight, cost-effective alternative to older copper and bronze compositions. As a result, the 2008 cent weighs just 2.35 grams and has a diameter of 19.05 millimeters, with a plain, smooth edge. The coin is magnetic, a significant feature introduced during the late 1990s, which allowed automated coin sorting and vending systems to more efficiently process low-denomination coins. The change in metal also drastically reduced the mint's production costs. By the 2000s, the price of producing a traditional copper coin had exceeded its face value. The copper-plated steel format allowed for continued cent production at a viable cost, at least temporarily. In terms of mintage, the Royal Canadian Mint produced over 800 million 1-cent coins in 2008, making it a very common issue in circulation. Despite its commonality, the 2008 cent holds importance as part of the final chapter of Canada's 1-cent denomination, which would be discontinued just a few years later. For collectors, the 2008 cent is easily accessible, but higher-grade examples, especially those in mint state, MS65 and above, or from proof-like or specimen sets, are sought after for album completion or typesets. Occasionally, error coins such as die cracks, off-center strikes, or misaligned dies appear among this issue, and while rare, they provide additional collecting interest and value. Culturally and historically, the 2008 cent is especially intriguing when viewed against the broader backdrop of its time. The year 2008 marked the beginning of a major global financial crisis, and economic discussions increasingly focused on efficiency, cost-cutting, and the value of money. In Canada, these conversations were mirrored in discussions about the cent's utility. It had long ceased to hold significant purchasing power. Inflation had rendered it nearly obsolete in everyday transactions, and many Canadians had grown annoyed by the inconvenience of handling such small change. Still, the cent was a deeply familiar part of Canadian life, used in childhood savings jars, charity drives, and cash register trays across the country. The 2008 issue, in this way, represents a kind of twilight for the denomination, widely used but on the brink of redundancy. Another key aspect of the 2008 cent is its role in advancing Canada's reputation as a leader in minting technology. The Royal Canadian Mint was by then world-renowned for its innovations in multi-ply plating and environmentally conscious production methods. The 2008 cent is an example of this forward-thinking philosophy, manufactured with high efficiency, lower material usage, and minimal visual compromise. Canada's innovations would go on to influence how other nations approached the minting of low-denomination coinage, and the techniques used in coins like the 2008 cent helped pave the way for advanced plating processes now used globally. From a numismatic standpoint, the 2008 cent represents both continuity and culmination. It features the most modern portrait of Queen Elizabeth II then in use, the longest-standing reverse design in Canadian circulation, and one of the most advanced minting techniques of its time. It exists within a narrow window of time when Canadian coinage was deeply modern, but still clinging to traditions set nearly a century earlier. The fact that the penny would be officially withdrawn from circulation in 2013, only 5 years later, gives the 2008 issue a kind of anticipatory quality. It is part of the final generation of Canadian cents, soon to become a relic of the past. For young collectors today, the 2008 cent may be one of the last pennies they remember using in everyday life. For seasoned collectors, it marks the conclusion of a long arc that began in 1858 with the first Canadian large cents. In conclusion, the 2008 Canadian 1-cent coin is a rich artifact of Canadian numismatic, cultural, and economic history. It blends royal symbolism, national pride, and advanced minting practices into a small, affordable, and familiar object. Though common in number, the 2008 cent is deeply symbolic of a country transitioning away from its smallest unit of currency, of a modernizing mint industry, and of a people slowly saying goodbye to the pocket change of generations. In its modest dimensions and quiet ubiquity, the 2008 cent tells a far larger story, one of legacy, innovation, and the gradual end of an era